Rank 8. The Type 30 Bayonet, Japan. Let's start at the bottom. The Type 30 bayonet was the standard sidearm of the Imperial Japanese soldier from 1907 all the way through the end of the Second World War. Picture this. You are an American Marine on Guadalcanal in 1942. A Japanese soldier charges out of the jungle screaming. Fixed to the muzzle of his Arisaka rifle is a blade nearly 16 inches long. It looks terrifying. It is terrifying. But here is the problem. The Type 30 was designed for one thing only: the bayonet charge. As a utility knife, it was useless. Too long. Too awkward. The handle was uncomfortable for any grip other than mounted to a rifle. Late-war Type 30s, produced as Japan ran out of steel and skilled labor, used inferior metallurgy. The blades chipped on bone. The locking mechanisms failed. Soldiers reported bayonets bending on impact. A weapon designed for the doctrine of 1905, sent into the close-quarters jungle fighting of 1943, where what a soldier actually needed was a short, sharp utility blade he could use for everything from opening rations to silent sentry removal. The Type 30 could do almost none of it. Rank 7. The Carcano M91 bayonet, Italy. Italy's standard bayonet, paired with the troubled Carcano rifle we ranked at the bottom of our previous list. The M91 bayonet was a folding design on some variants, fixed on others, and across the board it suffered from the same problems as the rifle it attached to. Cheap steel, poor heat treatment, inconsistent quality between factories. Italian soldiers in the deserts of North Africa found their bayonets rusting within weeks despite oiling. The folding mechanism on the Machado carbine variant was prone to jamming with sand. The blade was too short to be a serious thrusting weapon, and too thin to be a useful camp knife. Italian troops, when they had a choice, traded captured British or German blades at the first opportunity. The M91 sits here because it existed. Calling it a combat knife is generous. C tier, bad tier. Solid intentions, flawed execution. Rank 6. The Mark II trench knife, United States. The Mark II, sometimes called the knuckle duster, was America's attempt to update the legendary World War I Mark I trench knife. It had a double-edged dagger blade, a cast brass knuckle guard, and a skull-crusher pommel. On paper, terrifying. In practice, deeply flawed. The brass knuckle guard made the knife front-heavy and impossible to use as a utility tool. You could not whittle wood with it. You could not open a tin of rations. You could barely cut rope. The knuckle guard also meant the knife could not be sheathed efficiently or drawn quickly. The thin, double-edged blade chipped easily against bone or webbing gear. American soldiers issued the Mark II often left it behind and acquired a Kabar, or a captured German blade instead. The Mark II looked like a movie prop. In the mud of the Hurtgen Forest or the jungles of the Solomons, soldiers wanted a tool, not a costume. Rank 5. The Lee Enfield No. 4 Spike Bayonet, Britain. The British No. 4 Spike Bayonet, nicknamed the pig sticker by the soldiers who carried it, was a wartime cost-cutting measure that nobody loved. It was a thin cruciform spike, 8 inches long, designed for one purpose only: to be jabbed into an enemy. As a bayonet, it was effective enough. The thin spike penetrated wool greatcoats and webbing easily, but as a multi-purpose blade, it was useless. You could not cut anything with it. You could not skin a rabbit, open a crate, or cut wire. British soldiers, especially in the Pacific and Burma, where a utility blade was essential to daily survival, hated the spike. Many traded for or stole American Kabars, Australian machetes, or whatever else they could find. The spike did its job in a charge, but the soldier carrying it still needed a real knife somewhere on his belt, a bayonet that solved half the problem at best. B tier. Mid-tier, the reliable workhorses. Rank 4. The Mauser S84/98, Germany. Germany's standard infantry bayonet, paired with the Kar 98K rifle. The S84-48 was a sensible, well-made, 10-inch single-edged blade. German metallurgy was excellent. The blades held an edge. The fit and finish on early war examples was superb. As a fighting bayonet, it was effective. As a utility knife, it was workable. German soldiers used it to dig, to cut, to pry open ration tins, and on occasion in close combat. Its weakness was the same weakness that haunted much of Germany's late-war equipment: Quality collapsed as the war dragged on. (1944) production. S-84 48s used inferior steel, rougher grinding, and cruder fittings. An early war German bayonet was a fine tool. A late war example was a gamble. But across the war as a whole, it served its purpose without disgrace. Rank 3. The No. 5 Mark I bayonet. Britain. Britain's redemption. After the failures of the spike bayonet, the British Army developed the No. 5 Mark I, a proper blade designed for the jungle fighting of Burma and Malaya. 8 inches of single-edged carbon steel, a wooden grip, a leather sheath, mounted on the Lee Enfield No. 5 jungle carbine, it was a serious fighting blade. Off the rifle, it was a serious utility knife. British and Commonwealth troops in the 14th Army, fighting one of the most brutal jungle campaigns in human history, swore by it. It cut bamboo. It opened tins. It served in close combat when the fighting closed to inches. The No. 5 Mark I is the bayonet the British Army should have issued in 1939. It arrived in 1944, too late to be legendary, but good enough to be respected by every man who carried one. A tier. The elite. Rank 2. The Fairbairn-Sykes fighting knife. Britain. Now we move into the rarefied air. The Fairbairn-Sykes fighting knife was not a bayonet. It was not a utility blade. It was something new. A purpose-built killing tool designed by 2 former Shanghai municipal police officers, William Fairbairn and Eric Sykes, who had spent decades studying close-quarters combat in the alleys of 1920s and 1930s Shanghai. The Fairbairn-Sykes was a slim, double-edged stiletto with a needlepoint and a heavy brass or aluminium grip. 7 inches of blade designed to slip between ribs and reach vital organs. It was issued to the British Commandos, the Special Air Service, the Special Operations Executive, and to American Rangers and Office of Strategic Services operatives who trained alongside them. Behind enemy lines in occupied France, in the desert raids of the Long-Range Desert Group, on the cliffs of Saint-Nazaire, the Fairbairn-Sykes did silent work that conventional weapons could not. Its weakness was its specialization. It was a poor utility knife. The narrow blade snapped if used as a pry bar. The point bent if struck against bone at the wrong angle. But it was never meant to peel potatoes. It was meant to end a century's life without a sound. At that, no other knife of the war was its equal. S tier. Legendary. The blade that became a symbol. Rank 1. The Ka-Bar Usmik fighting knife. United States. And now we arrive at the top. The Ka-Bar. Properly designated the United States Marine Corps Mark II combat knife, but known to every Marine, sailor, and soldier who ever held one simply as the Ka-Bar. Adopted by the United States Marine Corps in 1942, after the failures of earlier American combat knives, the Ka-Bar was the answer to a specific question. What does a Marine actually need from a knife in the Pacific? The answer was everything. 7 inches of fixed carbon steel blade, single-edged, with a clipped point sharp enough for thrusting, but strong enough for prying. A stacked leather grip that stayed sure in wet hands. A steel pommel that could hammer in tent stakes or break a man's jaw. A leather sheath that survived saltwater, rain, and jungle rot. The Ka-Bar did everything. Marines used it to cut through coconut husks, open ration cans, dig fighting positions, sharpen sticks, pry open ammunition crates, and in the brutal close-quarters fighting of Tarawa, Peleliu, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa, to kill. It became, more than any other blade, the symbol of the American fighting man in the Pacific. Over 1 million Ka-Bars were produced during the war. They served in Korea. They served in Vietnam. They serve, in updated form, today. There is a reason the Ka-Bar is the most recognized combat knife in human history. It was not the most elegant blade of the war. The Fairbairn-Sykes was deadlier in trained hands. The German S-84 was better finished. But the Ka-Bar did more, in more theaters, in more hands, with more reliability, than any other knife of the Second World War. It earned the top tier the same way the M1 Garand earned its place. Not through one famous moment, but through 3 years of relentless, daily work in the worst conditions human beings have ever fought in. That is the ranking. From the Type 30 bayonet, a weapon designed for a war that no longer existed, to the Kabar, the blade that became the silhouette of a generation of American fighting men. If you enjoyed this video, the one on screen now is for you. Subscribe, hit the bell, and tell us in the comments which blade you would have ranked differently. We read every single one.